Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Love for you to join us. Jump into the chat room. We've got folks in there every evening. I want to share with you Pat Buchanan's thinking relative to what's happening in the Middle East. He's writing for WorldNetDaily.com. And he says, today we have troops in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and appear on the cusp of collisions with Venezuela and Iran, and yet we field armed forces a fraction of the size they were in the 1950s and the 1960s, as well as the Reagan era. And the U.S. national debt is now larger than the U.S. economy. He suggests to us that this is imperial overreach and that it's unsustainable. Nancy Pelosi's House just voted to cut off U.S. support for the Saudi war against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Senate may follow. Yet Trump is prepared to use his first veto to kill that war powers resolution and retain the right to help the Saudi war effort. His rationale is, should the U.S. not help the Saudis, the Houthis, supported by Iran, would likely prevail, and it would simply create a more serious crisis. But what is our vital interest in Yemen's civil war? Why would Trump not wish to extricate himself from that moral and humanitarian disaster? The answer: Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He and his regime would sustain a strategic defeat should the Houthis, supported by Iran, prevail. Prior to the Warsaw Conferences, called the U.S. That's a sentence that doesn't make any sense. Prior to the Warsaw Conferences, the U.S., I guess, was called to discuss in the Middle East. Israel's Prime Minister's office tweeted, quote, "This is an open meeting with representatives of leading Arab countries that are sitting down together with Israel in order to advance the common interest of war with Iran." That was just a week or two ago. That tweet hit the airwaves, the Ethernet, and all anybody could see was that war with Iran. The tweet was quickly deleted. It was replaced with a new tweet that spoke of, quote, the common interest of combating Iran. Buchanan goes on to say, like many Americans with whom he is close, Bibi Netanyahu has never hidden his belief as to what we Americans must do to Iran. Trump officials have discovered that Shiite Iran has been secretly collaborating with the Sunni terrorists of al-Qaeda. This could, headlined the Washington Times, provide, quote, the legal rationale for U.S. military strikes on Iran. At the Munich Security Conference, however, NATO allies, Britain, France, Germany, recommitted to the Iran nuclear treaty from which Trump withdrew, and to improved economic relations with Tehran. Trump pledged months ago to bring home the 2,000 U.S. troops in Syria and half of the 14,000 in Afghanistan, much to the consternation of his own party in Congress. His reasons? A U.S. pullout from Syria would abandon our Kurdish allies to the Turks, who see them as terrorists. It would also force the Kurds to cut a deal with Syria's Bashar Assad and Russia for their security and survival. That's what our Congress is looking at, and many other people, and wondering why the president is doing this. And just this week, Britain and France informed us that if we leave Syria, they will too. As for pulling out of Afghanistan, the probable result would be the fall of the Kabul government and return of the Taliban, who hold more territory now than they have since being overthrown 18 years ago. For Afghans who cast their lot with the Americans, it would not go well. U.S. relations with Russia, which Trump promised to improve, had chilled to Cold War status. The U.S. is pulling out of Ronald Reagan's INF Treaty, which bans land-based nuclear missiles of 300 to 3,000 mile range. Putin has said that any reintroduction of land-based U.S. missiles to Europe would mean a new class of Russian missiles targeted on Europe and on the United States. Today, the U.S. maintains a policy of containment where Russia and China are concerned, where Russia and China now being more united than they have ever been since the first days of the Cold War. We are responsible for defending 28 NATO nations in Europe, twice as many as during the Cold War, plus Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand. The question becomes, why are we the ones who are responsible for all of this? Where are these other nations? Why don't they step up? There are two reasons. One is they don't really want to. They're tied to these nations economically and strategically, in a sense, where they don't really want to start trouble. And secondly, their entire net worth is only about a third of what we are. We look at some of these European nations, and they would just be states here in the United States. We have states with a bigger budget than France or Great Britain, or maybe not them, but the smaller nations there's a whole bunch of. 3 large nations and a whole bunch of little guys. And they're not even willing to pony up their bargain, the part of the bargain they said they would pay. We are doing it all. And then when we decide that we're going to go in a different direction, suddenly we're the bad guy. Europe is going toward Iran. All I can say is good luck. These are people who don't play fair.